There's so many different things you can learn. And to me, it's almost impossible to read and not be better at your craft.
I can't count the number of times that I've heard someone say, I wish I had more time to read. Of course, there are certain seasons of life that lend themselves to reading and others where it's more difficult. It's a slower, more involved form of education and entertainment. But at the end of the day, reading is like anything else. Whether you have time for it is determined by whether you choose to make time for it. This week's conversation is about the value of reading to hone your craft and improve at your work. Welcome to Work is Good, a podcast where we aim to help people enjoy and excel at their work. We do this by having conversations about the beliefs, qualities, and habits that make that possible. We also start every episode with a brief housing market update and a mortgage question of the week. My name is Landon Buteau with Cleveland Street Mortgage, and I host this show with my dad, Chris Buteau, the owner and president at CSM. Please enjoy this week's episode. All right, Dad, we are going to talk this week a little bit about the question of reading and whether you should be reading in order to hone your craft, whether you should be making that a priority. And, I think a lot of people feel that sense of priority. I feel that sense, that obligation that it should be a priority, but I'm not sure how much. And I don't really make it a priority right now. So we're going to get into that a little bit, reading specifically over other forms of learning. But do you want to start with your market update for the week?
Yeah, you bet. Actually, several important things to note. There's a real sort of confluence of changes in the market that are happening. Maybe not necessarily, all of them are big changes. But number one, just in the real estate market, I dropped in an open house that was just, half a block away from my house this weekend on Sunday afternoon. It had been going, most of Sunday afternoon. I dropped in at 4:30, and the realtor had 35 separate groups through the house that day. So my point there is that the death of the real estate market has been greatly exaggerated. It's still a matter of pricing right, get the home in the right place. And he wasn't giving this home away.
Right.
He just priced it well, and he got a ton of interest. And by the weekend, the house was pending. He said he had 5 offers. I called him up and talked to him afterwards. So just be aware of that. On the flip side, there still are a lot of houses out there that aren't priced right, and so there is an opportunity for buyers too to go out there and find find houses that are sitting, that are ready to reprice, that are willing to negotiate. So on the interest rate side, rates have come down. The CPI, the inflation indicators that came out this week were favorable. They were lower than anticipated, than the market was anticipated. And the market was already anticipating they would be okay. And they were even lower than that. And so that's continued to give the bond market strength, and interest rates have come down. So just be aware of that.
Great. Okay, great. And I'll give you a quick mortgage question. We talked about this a little bit last week with a scenario that someone was asking about, where I'll give the exact scenario. This person wanted to buy a house for, they were looking generally $900,000, kind of the price range they were looking at. And they wanted to, this person in particular wanted to bring most of the cash to the table, but she also wanted to combine cash with her mom. And she and her mom were going to bring cash to the table. Her mom didn't need to be on the title. Her mom didn't need to be on the deed. So her mom was just giving the cash to get the house and be in the house, but she didn't need to be on the deed. This person wanted to be on the deed, and then she also wanted her brother to be on the mortgage as well. And then her brother would be the one actually paying the mortgage, being on the mortgage. And she was wondering if that's possible. My question is that possible? Is that a possible scenario? And what are reasons to do it or not do it, or do it differently?
Yeah, so that's a fairly unique situation where you have one individual, they're all family members. Mm-hmm. One individual, the mom is contributing a lot of cash, but doesn't care about ownership. So they're not going to be entitled, and they're not also going to be on the loan. The brother is going to be the one paying the mortgage, and presumably he'll be entitled as well. He'll be entitled along with the sister. With the sister. So the brother and sister, but the brother is going to be the only one on the loan. Is that
right.
Is that the
Correct.
situation?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. You can have multiple parties on title. So the mother's interest would be treated as a gift because she's not on title. And even if she were on title but not on the loan, technically she would still be treated as a gift. Her contribution would be treated as a gift.
So if they sell the house eventually, then she can have no legal claim to any of the sale money.
Well, I'm not an attorney, but if she's not entitled, then if she gave a gift to her kids, then that's a gift. And as far as I know, if she's not entitled, she'd have no claim to ownership.
Technically okay with, barring a good family agreement and situation, you're not going to get that money back legally.
Right.
You're not entitled to that money back.
Right.
If you're saying it's a gift.
Right. So it's a gift. But then the brother and sister can be untitled. Just, you can have multiple people on title. They don't both have to be on the loan. That's fine. We do that all the time. We do it a lot of times with spouses. And so but again, if in this case, the sister who is on title, but not on the loan and not contributing cash is she contributing cash?
Yes.
She's contributing cash. And so if she's not on the loan, then her cash contribution would also be considered a gift. And so, so you would just have to be aware of that. There are technicalities associated. Now,
so she would still be on the title. She would
be on title. And that's where there are differences between what underwriting deems to be the case and what the legal realities are. Right? Because she's obviously not giving a gift when she's putting cash in to buy the place and they're having some shared ownership. And so it's not certainly a gift in the classic sense of the word, but from an underwriting standpoint, they would treat it as a gift. And the only relevance to that is, they would have to make sure, is she an acceptable donor? It has to be a family member. That works. Does the program allow for gifts? Well, by and large, virtually all programs are going to allow for gifts. There are some programs that require the borrower to have some percentage of their own funds, but in this case, they're putting so much down that 100% gift would be fine. So that's a kind of an unusual situation, but it should work fine.
But and you can make some implications from that to slightly different situations there. But, great. Okay. Well, let's move on to our work topic for the week, which, as I mentioned, is reading. And the question for me, I come in kind of, I have a book on my desk over here that you bought for me, YouTube Secrets, that we discovered. It seems like a great book. I'm probably halfway through it, so I'm reading through it a little bit. But I haven't made it a regular routine, and that's, reading in general, we both come from kind of a background and context where reading in general we believe to be a really good thing. And uniquely compared to other forms of learning. And so my question is, should I be working harder to make reading a regular part of my work routine to learn new things to hone my craft?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it comes from. I haven't made time for it. I don't like when I hear people say I don't have time for reading, which is, it's probably the same with anything. But you hear it a lot with reading, and it's just a question of whether you're making time for reading.
Right.
But I think specifically with work, when you're wanting to read on topics that help you develop your trade and improve in what you're doing, it does take making time for that, planning time for that. In a sense, you might be drawn to it naturally in some ways, but that's kind of the situation I come from. I don't know how much is it a part of your regular routine? Is it on your schedule regularly, reading for work specifically, or?
More and more so. I know you specifically said reading. I think that reading can take, various forms. They can take, obviously there's reading the book, just reading an actual book, which is, of course, the classic meaning of that word. And then, of course, a lot of people listen to audiobooks. And I personally, I learn better. Now, some of this has to do with learning styles, right? I personally learn better when I'm able to hold a book in my hand and consume it at the pace, that I am comprehending. So I'll read through, and then if I want to ponder something for a minute, I can pause. I can go back and revisit it. Can't really do that with audiobooks. But at the same time, people have commutes, people have different kind of downtime where they can consume material that they would otherwise not have access to or have time for by audiobooks. So I think audiobooks are okay. And then I think podcasts are another way. And that's one thing I think you do a lot of, where, you're saying, we got this book and haven't really made the time to get through it as fast as I certainly could have. But you listen to a lot of podcasts and you've learned a lot and you've brought that to the table. So I do think there's a little bit of similarity in all of those things, in terms of what they bring. But reading itself, the question, do I read? I read a lot.
Right.
But do I read a ton of business books? That's what I've had to kind of force myself to do better. And, there's a couple of, kind of little catchy phrases, you've probably heard, readers are leaders, right? Readers are leaders, or learners are earners, and I think both of those are really true and really important reasons. If you want to get good at your craft, and it depends kind of what your craft is, but almost whatever you do, with the way that media gets shared these days, there's a bunch of material out there to make you better at it. And in very consumable bites. Yeah. It's not like you have to bite off, okay, I'm going to take on this 20-hour project to get better at my craft. You can take a 1-hour bite and probably meaningfully improve your craft.
Right. Yeah, I kind of unrelated note, sort of related. I was looking through, on a podcast, I heard a recommendation as far as building, just staying on top of the online developments, digital developments, and the recommendation was to go on the on the App Store, once a week or every day or something, and see what the top 20 apps were, so that you're not just hearing about it, after it's started to move, that you're seeing it firsthand where the attention is going. And so I was doing that, and one, which I haven't done, I think I did it once and discovered a couple apps, and one of the apps I saw, I can't remember what the name was because I wasn't interested in paying for the subscription, but there was a little free trial, so I looked into it, and it was one of the top apps on there, so I'm sure some listeners know what it is, but basically it was this concept of condensing books, chapters into little 30-second bites with the they don't have every book on there because they actually do the work of condensing it. And I think there's I don't know how it all works. I think there's a partnership with the actual authors.
Audible or whatever.
Yeah, I think you can't just grab it. But that came to mind. It takes the raw information and the core lesson. I don't think it completely replaces it.
Sure.
To your point of maximizing your time and figuring out ways to do it. I do think there's something unique about reading in the sense that audiobooks and podcasts, the reason I do them is because I can do them while I'm doing something else.
Right.
Which is valuable. But I do think reading, you almost literally cannot do anything else while you're reading. And I think that is a con, but I think it's also a pro. And it really makes you engage with what you're consuming.
Well, you do know that your sister used to listen to a book and read a book at the same time. A different book.
I'm skeptical.
She's pretty unique, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, skeptical or no, she did it.
Yeah,
I witnessed it.
Yeah.
How much of that got in. And not for the first time. I think that's something where you have to. That's when you're rereading. Both of those.
Yeah.
It's not the first time through. But yeah. Your point is well taken. I fully agree. That just sitting down with a book it requires 100% of your attention. Now I can read, for example, on a stationary bike.
Yeah.
So there is still some opportunities for multitasking where your brain is not occupied in the other activity.
Yeah. Very, very limited.
Yeah.
I think because you have to have zero brain and eye involvement in the other activity.
Yeah.
So
stationary bike.
Very limited. But yes,
Works.
they're out there.
I do think about my sweat from time to time dripping down on the pages, but other than that.
They're always sticky.
Yeah. That's true.
I'd like to see you in a sweatband. I think. Yeah, I mean it's not a unique in the sense that nothing else could replace some of the functions of it, but it is unique in the way you consume it, and I think the value that it brings. So I think, reading as a habit in general is almost a necessary habit to form in general in life, I think. And I think if you form that habit, it's going to pretty naturally translate to your work. But to the question of, should you be carving time for it? Should you feel an obligation? Should you see the extra, or can it be replaced by something else? I think it's somewhere in the middle is kind of what we're getting at of.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of it in terms of obligation.
Opportunity.
But I think more of opportunity and just how much do you want to grow? That's to me, I see it as opportunity. Because obligation, I don't know. I just can't. It's hard for me to think of it in that context. That your employer or maybe you're self-employed. And so it's just.
If you think about it, I think about it some things that way because kind of a stewardship perspective of if you have an opportunity in certain things, a lot of times it becomes an obligation. They're not a equivalent.
Yeah, but then you have priorities, right? So then it's like, okay, I got other things I could read about besides business books.
Right.
And so I just think I think it's an enormous opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think these maxims are true. Readers are leaders. I absolutely believe that. And because there are so many aspects of leadership, for example, that are reducible to concepts, principles, examples, that can be taught through books, that you can learn through books.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are very fortunate to grow up in an environment where that's, just sort of part of the atmosphere that they breathe. That's great. And even then, there's tons more that they can learn. But a lot of people don't,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much. I think one of the things I realized is when I stood, because I never grew up in that environment, and I don't think I don't
reading
think
or the
leadership.
leadership.
Yeah, and I don't think I even raised you guys in that context. It was just kind of do your thing and try and be faithful, and but not really thinking intentionally about developing leadership. And there's so much low hanging fruit. When for the vast majority of people, when you start to you grab a book on leadership, for example, and you start to read things and you go, man, I never really thought of that, but that's really powerful, and it's fairly simple. It doesn't mean we'll all be great at it.
Yeah.
But it's powerful to think, oh, I need to be thinking about that, and I need to get better at doing those things. And so I think there's so much you can learn, and leadership isn't necessarily formal. There's formal leadership, and then there's, all of us are informal leaders in one way or another, and when that comes down to influence.
Mm-hmm.
A leader is an influencer, and all of us have opportunities to influence others in ways that benefit them and benefit ourselves. And so I think that, There's leadership. There's motivational. There are a ton of books out there on motivational aspects of whatever you're wanting to be motivated about. Or how to be a better salesperson, how to do the blocking and tackling of whatever business you're in every day to make sure that you're going to produce good results. And then there's technical. There's the technical elements. For us, it's product knowledge. We're learning different products. We're learning different underwriting things. We're learning different sales tactics. And so there's so many different things you can learn. And to me, it's almost impossible to read and not be better at your craft. And so I think it's your word. I think opportunity is the right word for that.
Yeah, and I think one other note on getting yourself to take that opportunity is because that's what every time I see that the copy of that book over there, I have a sense of I should be reading that, but and so I'm aware that there's an opportunity and that it's a good thing and that I gain value every time I read it, but it's also am I gonna make the time for it? And I think we've touched on habits before. I think habit is really powerful in terms of reading, and I think you can build habit by doing it in small amounts too. By, no, I don't have time to sit down and read for 15 minutes right now. It could be 5 minutes, and I think you can still get value. And it depends on the book. And, you might need a larger chunk for certain books.
Right.
But as a majority, if you can do it, you can do it in small amounts, and as long as you stay consistent. If you read for 5 minutes one day and then you waited a week to read again, then that 5 minutes might not be super valuable. But if you read for 5 minutes one day and then you read again for 5 minutes the next day, then I think that 5 minutes is still valuable.
Have you read, speaking of reading,
Atomic Habits?
Atomic Habits?
I have not. I have it on the books.
And the other thing too is, you mentioned you look at that book and you feel an obligation, and part of it is, so I would ask you, are there any books that you've read, business books, in let's say the last 6 months, that you didn't need the sense of obligation to jump into it?
You wanted to?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm at a point right now where I'm really excited about what we're doing and about, I enjoy thinking about work and my free time, and part of what I've kind of caught the entrepreneurial fever, and so I get excited about trying to grow our company, and I enjoy thinking about that in my free time. So anything related to something I think is going to do that. So YouTube Secrets is about YouTube specifically, but I think YouTube is a key piece of what we're doing here at Cleveland Street. And so I get excited about that, and I haven't needed, it doesn't take discipline. It just takes, honestly, it takes the difference between before this podcast, when I wanted to read it but didn't, and hopefully after it, is the reminder of doesn't have to be 15 minutes. So to answer your question, yes, there are books, most business books that I read right now I get excited about. It's just remembering it's worth it, and it doesn't have to be even 15, 30 minutes. It can be 5, 10.
Right. Yeah.
Are there some for you that you've picked up, or there have been along the way? I'm sure. Yeah,
there have been along the way. Most of them are the more motivational books, but some of them are kind of more on the philosophical, maybe, or strategic. Sometimes I remember I read a book called The Compound Effect many years ago, and it sort of builds on what you just said about habits. It was just the idea that doing little things consistently over time compounds those. The impact of those things that you do. And that was a super helpful book for me. It was interesting. The illustration he used was, there was a woman that he was working with who was super overweight and couldn't walk, down the driveway and back. It was just and basically asked her, okay, well, can you walk halfway down and back? So do that. This week, walk halfway down and back, and then go all the way down and back, and then and it was that, and eventually she was running marathons. And this was purportedly a true story of a real person's experience, but the idea behind it was really powerful. To me is just the idea that you can do these little things consistently over time, and the impact really does become magnified. It compounds as you do them consistently. And what seemed unthinkable, a little time ago is now actually happening, and you're moving on to the next thing. So I think a habit, when you bring up habits, and I've started to read Atomic Habits, and since you've brought that into the conversation about reading specifically, I think I'm going to try some of those principles that he brings up in that book to establish a more consistent business reading. I want to create a habit of reading business books consistently.
Right.
And there are some very practical things in that book to do. So yeah.
Great. Well, you kind of already we've mentioned a couple different books, but since we're talking about reading and we like reading, I'm gonna conclude here with two things. One is a book recommendation from each of us, and two is just a single takeaway, which may have been something we've each already said, but just one final takeaway that we're going to walk away from here with. So what is your book recommendation for today?
So what I'm reading right now is Atomic Habits. I'm in the and as with any book, there are philosophies that undergird, psychology, and you don't have to agree with everything, which I generally don't. I don't always agree with everything, but there are truths contained there. They're very that are accurate observations of human nature. And I think that's really what the power of that book is there are some very useful truths about human nature and how to get yourself into the habit of doing something that you want to do, but you're not just naturally motivated to do enough to where it hasn't become a habit. So that's a book that I would recommend, and I'm going to apply that recommendation to myself. I am applying it to myself. Yeah,
that's great. Well, this is my recommendation is somewhat related and somewhat not. It is Pep Confidential. I think you've read it. I don't know if
no, I haven't. I've seen it on your bookshelf.
Okay, it's not. I don't. It's been a while.
You should tell people what it's about.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I don't remember it being like the best writing. But it was kind of a book documentary, basically, on Pep Guardiola, who is arguably the greatest soccer coaching right now, and coaches for Manchester City in England. And what stuck out to me, what was really interesting to me, which is somewhat related to today, is just kind of his drive, and that's kind of what, and he's on a different level of how obsessed he is with what he's doing and how much of his life it is, and I don't want that to be my situation, and
right.
And it can become a bad thing to the degree that it becomes everything, but it's really impressive to see how driven he is, and the way he thinks about the game itself of soccer. Because you think about, he's got to be the greatest leader in the world because he's a coach and coaches one of the greatest teams and has had so much success, and he obviously is, but it's also really impressive to me just how obsessed with the technical level of it all. And I think there's more room to grow in that, and there's a lot of value in that in any profession than sometimes we realize that the value of being obsessed with the technical aspects of what you do can have a huge impact. It's a good book.
Yeah.
Good book. Final takeaway from you?
This has been good. Just this is motivating me just to ponder the value of reading. It really needs no defense. It's self-evident.
Yeah.
And so just to talk about it is motivating me to really seek to build the habits, and specifically business books. Because I love reading. I like, I read spiritual books. I read my Bible. And then I just like fun classics.
Right. Stories.
Good stories. I love reading,
Right.
and so I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with being disciplined about, business books. And so this is encouraging.
Yeah, and along with that, I think combine it with that. My takeaway is 5 minutes. Just come in and be okay with 5 minutes of reading, not finishing a chapter. Maybe a practical necessity you're gonna have to do is keep a paper clip on hand instead of just remembering where you are. Because sometimes that's why I have to read longer than I know I should be, and then the next time I'm like, no, I can't read that long. So, practical step: keep something on hand to mark your spot and read in 5 minutes. Form a habit and make it a regular part of what you do. That's my takeaway. Thanks for listening to Work is Good. If you enjoyed it, share it, leave a review, and listen next week.